America's entire power stems from the dollar's dominance across the world. So what I also advocate for is a neutral global reserve currency to denominate trade. So how do you think we can reform the global order? How do you think we should respond to this rupture in the global order?
Change is always extremely difficult. And there's also the question of what do you change to? And you can say, okay, it's easy to always point out the flaws of the current system, but it's difficult to understand the flaws of what you're going to.
How do you do that? The secret to productive disagreement. Welcome to Into the Desert, exploring the wilderness of ideas. Don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons. And we need your support. The algorithms are pushing divisive content while hiding serious discussion. Please become a fellow adventurer on Patreon and support this channel's mission of encouraging discussion, not division. The link is in the description. So, Elgin, recently you were on Mission Underground podcast, and one of the things that I noticed in this podcast was that the host of the podcast had some very stark beliefs that I had a hard time agreeing with. There was a lot of bias in the questions that you were asked, and there was a lot of contradictions in his belief, and it was hard for me to even get through the questions, let alone listen to the whole podcast. But you handled it really, really well. You were able to have conversations where the host even agreed with you. And I thought that was really kind of interesting and something that I personally have not been able to do. How do you do that? How do you have conversations with someone you disagree with and not nitpick or point out all of the errors and just really be able to bring about a conversation?
Well, it's not easy. We see that every day on the news where people are yelling back and forth to each other, calling people names. So it's not like it's a trivial thing to do. And quite frankly, it's something I practiced my entire life. I look for conversations with people I disagree with. And one of the big things is I listen. Because even when I disagree with someone completely, and I disagree with this host quite a bit, I still learn things. If nothing else, I learn what they think and how they view the world. And that was kind of an important thing in this discussion because I'm from America. He's from England. He looks like I believe he's from either Pakistan or India or so originally, but he's British now and podcasting out of Britain. And so it's a non-American point of view, clearly was. In fact, one of the things he believes is the American empire, as he calls it, is one of the biggest destructive forces in the world. So there's not a lot of room that we were going to have for agreement initially. But one of the big things I do when I do this is I don't focus on our disagreements. I actively look for underlying principles or things that we actually can agree on. And so one of the things I would do is I would revert back to, well, here's how I view things, and let him ask questions about that. And then sometimes he would make a statement that I would disagree with, and I wouldn't attack him. I would just give him a particular reason why I disagree.
But that's not an easy skill to learn. So I know you mentioned that, you talk to a lot of people, you seek out people who disagree with you. I'm assuming when you started, you were probably similar to me where they would make a statement and you'd want to point out all of the things that was wrong with that statement. And that obviously doesn't work building conversations. All that does is put them on the defensive and shuts down the conversation. And now you're done. How do you learn? How do you have enough conversations that you can get past okay, maybe don't nitpick. Let's redirect the question.
Well, you do have to actively search them out. I mean, yeah, when I was much younger, I tended to, go for the gotcha question or really try to undermine them totally. And eventually I realized that's just not a good strategy for having conversations. They would either get frustrated and leave, or both of us would start yelling or something like that. And it didn't go anywhere, and I didn't learn anything. So I started looking for other ways to have conversations. And yeah, it's hit or miss. There are people, yeah, I talk with people across the political spectrum. I talk with people across the spiritual spectrum. Um, I talk with atheists, I talk with Christians, fundamentalists and liberal Christians. You know, some people wonder how I can talk to people like that. It's because I have certain fundamental presuppositions going in, which is one of them is that I'm not 100% right. I'm not the perfect font of knowledge. I have things I can learn. So when I go into a conversation, one of the things I want to learn is, you know, what is wrong with my beliefs? And so just by starting with that particular point of view, it suddenly, I'm no longer wanting to attack them. I'm wanting them actually to attack me. There are lots of times in my life where I thought I just had this absolutely killer argument that was just going to utterly devastate the opposition. And once I developed it and honed it, I was ready to go deploy my new, rhetorical weapon. I would search for some innocent victim out there that I could, on the other side, that I could go in and I could just, here's this perfect argument, and it's just going to destroy them. And eventually I would find somebody and I would lay out my argument and wait for them to crumble at my feet. And then all of a sudden they go, yeah, but what about, and my whole argument crumbled. So I learned from things like that it's best to be humble. It's best to not assume you know everything and see what they can teach you, because your position may be right, but probably is not going to be 100% perfectly right. And so, just a simple human nature. We are wired to be far better at picking out the problems with things we disagree with than things we agree with. So what I look to go to people and what I look to have discussions with people that are disagreeing, I'm kind of hoping they're going to point out problems in my argument. Seriously, I don't expect them, after doing this for so many years, I don't expect them to completely show me I'm wrong. I'd be open to that if they could do it, but that's kind of unlikely at this point. But what they do show me is they show me things I'm missing, things I had not considered. And that's what I have the discussion for. And also, that's primary. Secondary is I'm hoping to enlighten them a bit and maybe give them some things to think about. I don't realistically expect them to change their mind, but maybe I'm going to say something that will cause them to think deeper and question a little bit about what they're doing and sort of take on the same attitude.
Yeah. You were talking about, the silver bullet argument, so to speak. And, you see that all the time. You see these clickbait YouTube videos where Group A has argument with Group B and destroys them. And, the videos are kind of like, ooh, what's this argument? I want to see it. I want to watch it. And I always click on these videos and then I come away disappointed because, okay, yeah, they may have made a good argument. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes it's like, what was that? But there's many times where they make the argument, but they didn't change anybody's mind. They didn't destroy the person who disagreed with them. The other person's like, okay, I'm just going to walk away. And I'm always disappointed because I think we inherently think that there's a perfect, like, if you could just say the right argument, you would sway everybody. And I don't think that that exists. I don't think that there is the ability to have a single argument that is cohesive to sway any opposition.
Yeah. Well, when you're and this is one area I have an advantage because I have made significant changes in my beliefs over my years. I used to be an atheist. I used to attack Christians. How could they believe in such a thing? And most of the Christians I would talk to had no idea how to handle the arguments I was using. But every once in a while, I would come up to a Christian who actually had studied some of these things and were able to answer some of my points. And, granted, I'm now a Christian, but I didn't go from atheist to Christian in a single discussion, right? That was something that took a long time, and I had to do a lot of thinking. And there are many, many times where I was in an argument with somebody, a discussion, and they would say something that undermined my position. And I would be silent and I would walk off, right? Or the conversation would end somehow. But I would think about that. I would go home. How do I answer that question? How come I didn't have a good reply? And in thinking through that, I ultimately reflected to the point that, well, I really can't use that argument anymore. And I have a Bible I used at the time, and the back of the Bible had written a whole bunch of Bible verses that had problems with them. And over time, that list of Bible verses got kind of crossed off to the point that there wasn't anything left. And that's how, I view things. When you have a conversation with somebody, you're not going to, if you get a MAGA Republican with a never Trump Democrat and you put them in the same room, I don't expect one or the other to come out being converted completely to the other side. What I would hope is that maybe they could see a little bit of what the other side is saying and maybe move a little closer together. More reasonable is you could get like a center right and a center left person that could have an actually intelligent conversation, and that they might be able to come up with potential solutions. I actually think a lot of our problems that are so divisive at the moment, it could easily be fixed if people would just listen to the other side and then seek a consensus. Yeah, you're not going to agree completely with me, and I'm not going to agree completely with you, but maybe we can come up with a set of areas that we can agree on and then step forward. And that's not an easy process. And it's particularly not easy when each side is yelling at the other side. The other aspect of this is that it's so divisive at the moment, is that even if you have reasonable people on both sides who begin to step forward and try and work together, they get called traitors and they get attacked themselves. You see this with Fetterman. Fetterman refuses to call Republicans Nazis. He refuses to launch into the attacks so common among Democrats these days. And Fetterman's getting attacked as a traitor to his party. So it's a very complex situation, but it does have a solution.
Yeah, and I think that's where, I don't know when this changed. Maybe you remember, but this idea that you can't please anyone. I've always heard that you can't please anyone, but I feel like we're living in a society where that's the idea. You need to be able to please everyone. You need to be able to get along with everybody, and disagreement is bad. Disagreement is wrong. Disagreement is, evil in some way, shape, or form. And I don't know where that came from. I don't know why we think disagreeing is such a bad thing, because it's disagreements that help us find the truth, right? You always hear that there's more than two sides to a story, and the common thing is there's at least three sides to a story. You have side A, you have side B, and then you have the truth. And if you don't have side A and side B talking, then you'll never find the truth. And I'm just really interested in why we've come to this society where you can't talk if you disagree, because then you'll never find the truth.
Yeah, it's kind of a paradox for our age, because the whole concept of democracy, rule by the people, is that the people talk to each other. They actually come together on a consensus opinion, and that's what governs society. The problem is because of a number of different factors, and one of them is obviously social media and the algorithms. It's very clear that Yeah, well, the thing is, emotion sells, right? Go back into movies in the 30s and 40s. It's not intellectual points that make a great movie. It's emotional impact that makes a great movie, which is why they tend to do stories about violence, and they tend to do stories about sex and other things, because those are the stories that will grab you. They tend to they'll do a story with a family relationship, and the family's breaking apart. It's a inherent struggle that will get people to use modern parlances to click on it and watch. It's why they don't advertise debates on social media with a very intellectual discussion between two people who sharply disagree. No, they'll say side A destroys side B. See, this person's devastating response stops the opposite, and they'll play it up into the conflict side. And there's some other corresponding factors that have happened over the last 40 years or so that has moved us from we're back. For example, when Reagan was elected president, he had a Democratic House and a Republican Senate. And to think about it, those different groups, Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan, they got together and they crafted Reagan's tax plan. If you had that same situation today, Reagan's tax plan have never been passed, or at least not passed the way it was, because the Democrats would have refused to work with Reagan, and Republicans, if it reversed the situation, Republicans would refuse to work with the Democrat, like Obama or something. And therefore, nothing will happen. Everyone wants an all or nothing approach. And quite frankly, when you have an all or nothing approach, you usually end up in the end with nothing. So, and there's actually a lot of examples I could give of situations where people wanted all or nothing, and therefore they ended up with nothing. So that's grown over the years. Social media has exacerbated, particularly, we talk about social media. One of the aspects we don't realize is the number of bots that are out there. And so there are foreign governments who have a vested interest in dividing American public. And therefore they have lots of bots that their sole purpose is to split the American public. They don't care whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans. What they want is there to be a split and have both sides fighting against each other so that we can't actually come to an agreement. So that's a factor as well. So you have all these various factors. The bottom line, here we are with, the main focus of both parties now is to defeat the other party. Well, that is something that can't last forever, because it's going to resolve. Either the division will go away, or one side or the other will win and dominate, at which point you don't really have a democracy anymore anyway. So this is something that can't last forever. What's in doubt is how it's going to end.
That's an interesting point that you bring up too, is because there's a number of books that I've read. I'm a huge fan of fiction books, and there is a number one where a key plot point is you have two sides, but the one side creates a division in the other side as a way of weakening them so that, the first side wins. And it's always up to, like, you see this, a really good example that probably most people have seen is Civil War, right? You have the AI robot who really puts a divide in the superheroes. And so they're fighting amongst themselves instead of fighting the bad guy. And why? Aren't they on the same side? Yes, they might disagree on, who's in charge and, at what point do we draw the line? Or, Tony Stark did a big mistake, and so they're going to fight with him about the mistake. But you solve the problem first, then you can follow the blame and figure out how to have it not happen again. But having that division weakens the team. It weakens what should be something wonderful.
And that's kind of where we are today with the United States, because there's a whole series of problems. Like illegal immigration is actually an easily solvable problem, except neither side was willing to give an inch to let it be solved, right? Because they both sides are taking an all or nothing approach, right? Okay, however right your side may be, whichever side you're on, all or nothing ends up with nothing. Of course, they always hope that they're going to get all, right? But you're taking a crapshoot. If you have a majority of one, if you get 50% plus one and you get to pass exactly what you want to pass, that will only last until you lose the one seat in the legislature or whatever, and now it's 50% plus one on the other side, and they will completely erase everything you did. You see that now with executive orders from presidents, right? When Biden came in, first thing he did is issued a whole slew of executive orders to completely reverse what Trump had did. And then when Trump won re-election this time, he issued a whole slew of executive orders to reverse all the orders that Biden had put in. Well, what if we actually ruled by consensus where you could, okay, instead of settling for 50% plus one, you get a law that you can get a 60 or 70% approval of. Nobody gets everything they want, but they get a large part of what they want. And so you put together this law, you pass it. Well, that consensus law is going to last a lot longer than a 50% plus one majority. And of course, now we're in the situation where the laws are changing so quickly, particularly when you add in all the court cases, because, Trump comes in or Biden comes in and issues an executive order, and then suddenly it's tied up in the courts for 3 or 4 months or years. And so it doesn't even go into effect until close to the end of their term. So their solutions don't even last very long. So this is the dysfunction in our democracy at the moment. And it comes from us not being able to talk to each other and be willing to work with each other. And granted, it's going to take time, effort. It's not going to be easy. It's much easier to pounce back at somebody than to listen thoughtfully and try to come up with a cogent response. But the cogent response is much more effective in the long run.
So what do you think? Is it important to have positive disagreements? Or is it more important to defeat the other side? Do you think these strategies work? Do you have any others? Let us know down in the comments. We do read your comments and respond to many of them. And if you made it this far in the video, consider watching one of our other videos and supporting our channel on Patreon. Thank you again for watching Into the Desert, Exploring the Wilderness of Ideas. And to our fellow adventurers, a special thank you for helping to support this channel out on Patreon.